Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the Plankton community. This is Fighter Strike 95, and today we're here, guys. I can't believe we're doing this. Welcome to our brand new series. It will be the revival and reboot of our All Country series back when I did in 2024. But today we're here to start our new series of all the countries. Like the last one, we're going to be visiting all the countries. This time around, we're going to do them A to Z. And it just so happens our first country today is the mountainous country of Afghanistan. Now, of course, most of you guys all think Afghanistan, most people think it's hostile and home to the Taliban, in that you're right. However, there's a lot of secrets about Afghanistan that most people probably don't know about. And that's why we're here today to explore that. Before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone in chat, all the lurkers and mods. Good to have you guys here. So we're here at Herat Airport. Let me go ahead and get that posted. Let me go ahead and get that up. So we're in Herat Airport, Oscar Alpha Hotel Romeo. And our flight plan, we only got 2 legs for this one, but they're gonna be pretty long legs. So that is where we're gonna be taking today. So here's our flight plan. It is a pretty simple one. We start from Herat. Um, we're gonna briefly fly over Herat for a bit. Fly over Herat, and then head our way over to our first stop here at Oscar Alpha Tango November. We'll stop here at Tireen Airport. Then from there, we'll have one last leg and we'll fly all the way through the Afghan mountains. And we'll fly our way over to Kabul International Airport in the heart of the capital of Afghanistan. So that is what we're going to be doing today. Something pretty simple. So the plane we're taking here today, it is the Saab 340. I wanted to take this plane today since I've flown the King Air recently, and I wanted to try something a little different. I still wanted like a King Air or turboprop, but I wanted to do something a little different, and I haven't taken the Saab out for a spin. Thank you for the follow, Mirad683. Thank you for the follow. I really do appreciate you guys being here. So we're taking the Saab 340 today. Good old turboprop from Sweden, very successful turboprop liner. I thought it would be pretty interesting to fly this in Afghanistan. Go ahead and get this. Before we get started, we're actually in Herat International Airport, or known by its full name as the Khawaja Abdullah Ansari International Airport, Oscar Alpha Hotel Romeo, built in southeast of Herat, Afghanistan, next to the Kandahar Highway. And it's the fourth largest commercial airport in the country, behind Kabul International, Kandahar International, and Mazar-i-Sharif International Airport. And it was built originally in the 60s by U.S. engineers. It was used by the Soviet forces during the 1980s as a base for fighters and transport aircraft. Of course, the Taliban took control of this airport in 1995. It was bombed by the anti-Taliban alliance in 1996. And then the U.S. used this area mainly for a lot of tankers and troop transport. Of course, in 2021, the Taliban then took control of the airport again, along with other parts of Herat. That's what. There. Got a refill. We're going to go ahead and get this started. It's been a while since I turned this thing on. I think It's been a while since I've started this thing, but we're not really going to turn on any of the electrics and stuff. We're going to get this engine started, of course. And we finally get this started. So we're going to go taxi all the way down to runway 36 is where we're going to be taking off. So yeah, it's nice to be doing this series again, but this time I wanted to do it every country at a time. So once we get in the air, we'll talk more about Afghanistan and why we wanted to do. I think everything's starting to be on. Let's go ahead and talk about Herat since we're going to be flying over. The state of Herat, Afghanistan, is Afghanistan's third largest city, averaging 574,000 people. This oasis city is located in the heart of the Hari River in the western part of Afghanistan. And this ancient city, having been around for hundreds of over 2,000 years old. This city served as a major part of the Silk Road that stretched between from West Asia, South Central, and South Asia, and is a regional hub for the western half of the country. It dates back to Avestan times. It's very historically known as a wine-producing area. It has a number of historic sites, including the Herat Citadel and the Musalla Complex. During the Middle Ages, Herat was one of the most important cities of Khorasan, and it was known as the Pearl. Of course, this area was conquered by the infamous conqueror Tamerlane, and became a center for intellectual and artistic life in the Islamic world. Of course, one of the more interesting things about Herat is of course Herat was then taken over by the Taliban in 2021. But the city itself is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The entire city, and there's tons of historic landmarks and stuff all over the city. And there's all sorts of different monuments. The Citadel, the Musalla Complex are all very well-known monuments, as well as plenty of museums, mosques, mausoleums, and found all over the city. It's a historic area. It has been a while since I've set this thing. Go ahead and take off. We're going to set 16,000 feet. Oh, I figured out where the heading is. Yeah, this is the city of Herat. This is the old city of Herat here in Afghanistan. I already posted some information in the Discord about Afghanistan from Geography Now, which I'm mainly going to be using for some of the videos from him. This is the city of Herat. We're going to come to see. So as we climb to 16,000 feet, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about Afghanistan for a bit. Now, of course, the history section for Afghanistan is a long one. I mean, Afghanistan, long history. So let's talk a bit about Afghanistan since we're here. We're flying up to 16,000 feet. Afghanistan is the landlocked country all the way in the crossroads of Central and South Asia, bordered by several countries including Pakistan to the east and south, Iran to the west, Turkmenistan to the northwest, Uzbekistan to the north, Tajikistan to the northeast, and China to the northeast and east, occupying 652,000 square kilometers. It's predominantly mountainous with plains in the north and southwest, separated by the Hindu Kush mountain range. The capital and largest city is in Kabul, and the population is around 36 to 50 million people. Of course, Afghanistan is a very old country. Humans have been part of Afghanistan since the Middle Paleolithic era, and it's commonly referred to as the Graveyard of Empires because it's seen numerous military campaigns, from the Persians to Alexander the Great, the Maurya Empire, Arab Muslims, Mongols, British, the Soviets, and even a US-led coalition. And yet, Afghanistan still survives even now. Of course, Afghanistan was a major area for a lot of conflicts due to the fact that it was in multiple spheres of influence. So as a result, Afghanistan became a center of Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and of course, sadly for Afghanistan, the second half of the 20th century wasn't so great with it. Since the late 70s, it's been dominated by extensive warfare, coups, invasions, insurgencies, and civil wars. And all that can be, and that was started with the Communist Revolution in 1973. And it caused the Soviets to invade the next year, and then over the past 50 years has been more and more conflict. As a result of the Taliban return to power in 2021, Afghanistan is still widely unrecognized by the international community due to the human rights violation. Now, Afghanistan itself is actually rich in natural resources, mainly lithium, iron, zinc, and copper. It's one of the largest producers of cannabis resin, as well as saffron and cashmere. And of course, due to all the issues, there's high levels of terrorism, poverty, and child malnutrition. And it's one of our world's least developed countries. However, Afghanistan, if it has one thing going for it, one of its biggest issues historically has always been is the modern conflict. Of course, one interesting tidbit about Afghanistan, though, is its history. Afghanistan has a long history. People have been living in Afghanistan for at least 50,000 years ago, and some of the earliest farming communities in the world. And there's all sorts of sites. Many people compare Afghanistan's historical sites in value to that of Egypt, because you can find artifacts of the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, and Bronze Ages found all over the country. Of course, there have been multiple waves of nomadic people, but after 2000 BCE, many of those semi-nomadic people from Central Asia moved to Afghanistan, and one of those being Indo-Iranians, which later migrated to South Asia, West Asia, and towards Europe. Of course, historically, it's always been part of the Persian-Iranian sphere, as in 600 BCE, the Achaemenids overthrew the Medes and incorporated much of Afghanistan into the boundaries of it. And of course, Afghanistan was a major area of Zoroastrianism. And as a result, it's known by the second homeland of Zoroastrianism. Of course, Afghanistan was once again involved in another major conflict, only this time with Alexander the Great. Yes, everyone probably has heard about Alexander the Great. About Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, he had his empire from Macedonia, which is in central Greece, and everyone should probably have at least been aware of his military pagan genius. Well, apparently he conquered the entirety of the Persian Empire from his home place in Macedonia. Conquered all the Greek isles, and then went through east through Anatolia, went across the Middle East, and he traveled all the way through Persia, and finally, the outer edges of his empire made his way into Afghanistan in 330 BC, beating Darius III of Persia in the Battle of Gaugamela, and they arrived in Afghanistan. Of course, following his brief occupation, the successor state, the Seleucids, controlled this area until 305 BCE, when they gave much of it to the young Maurya Empire. as part of a line street, and they controlled this area until 185. Of course, then again, much of this area is broken away by other trades and civilization. Of course, one major area that really benefited Afghanistan was, of course, the Silk Road, and it began during the first century and allowed Afghanistan to flourish with trades with routes to China, India, Persia, and Uzbekistan. And a lot of goods were traded there: silk, Persian silver, and Roman gold. Of course, during the first century BCE, the Parthian Empire subjugated this region, but lost it to their vassals. And of course, later on, the Kushan Empire became the great patrons of Buddhist culture, making Buddhism flourish in the region. And they lasted until the 3rd century CE, when they were overthrown by the Sassanids, another Iranian empire. And again, they've been going back and forth all this time until the Turk-Shani in the 7th century. And they were Buddhist. And then, of course, it was then taken over by 870 by another Hindu dynasty, before the Saffarids came in 787. But of course, one major event that changed a lot of Afghanistan for years to come was, of course, in 642 CE, when Arab Muslims brought Islam to Herat and Saranjang. And some of the inhabitants have actually accepted it, and it began spreading east. Before Islam, the region of Afghanistan used to be home to all sorts of beliefs and cults, resulting in a lot of syncretism between combined practices between dominant religions like Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Greco-Buddhism, and more. But now with Islam, it effectively took over pretty much all, but took over the entirety of Afghanistan. All fell to Islam, the conversion. And the first Muslims to conquer it were the Saffarids, and they conquered pretty much most of Afghanistan during this time, with different kingdoms and groups. By the 11th century, Muhammad Afghanzi had defeated the remaining Hindu rulers and effectively Islamicized the entire wider region of Afghanistan. It made Ghazni the important city and prioritized intellectuals like the historian al-Biruni and the poet Ferdowsi. Of course, then they were overthrown in 1186 by the Ghurids, who mainly did a lot of architectural achievements, including the remote minaret of Jam, which is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. However, the major thing was, it was the graveyards of empires. However, unfortunately, it didn't help the Afghans against the Mongols, as in 1219 CE, Genghis Khan had rule over the region. Hey, Shirley Dev, good to see you. We're in Afghanistan here today. We're flying over Afghanistan here for the first part. And yes, this history section is a long one, but it's because Afghanistan's been around for hundreds of thousands of years. Genghis Khan and his Mongols overran the entire region. His troops are said to have annihilated the entire cities of Herat and Baka, as well as Bamyan. And it caused many locals to return back to their agrarian rural society. The Mongol rule continued all the way to the Ilkhanate in the northwest, and the Kaji, until Timur established the Timurid Empire in 1370. And the Timurs brought much of the glory back to this region with his own Renaissance, whose glory matched that of Florence. Yes. Herat became a major city for culture and identity in the region. Of course, saying about Genghis Khan, of course, Genghis Khan, he did this to a lot of cities. It's not just in Central Asia. He did this to a lot of areas. China, Southeast Asia, and of course, Central Asia bared a lot of his wrath. Yes, you shouldn't be playing music in Afghanistan, but that's true. But this is a flight sim, Short Dev. I don't think they'll go after me for that. In the 16th century, Babur, the ruler of the Mughals, Babur arrived and captured Kabul from the Arghun dynasty, and Babur later conquered the Afghan dynasty that ruled the Delhi Sultanate and it became known as later on the Mughals ruled this territory. The Mughals became a big part of this area for hundreds of years. Of course, in 1709, Moraz Hotaka, local tribe leaders, successfully rebelled against the Safavids and defeated Gurgen Khan, the Georgian governor at the time, to establish his own kingdom. Of course, 1738, Nader Shah and his forces captured the city of Kandahar, the last Hotak stronghold from the Shah at the time. And soon, his forces later invaded India, and he plundered Delhi. Basically, his own empire lasted for a bit longer. And then later on, in 1747, was the start of a new empire, the Durrani Empire, which was an Afghan empire that lasted quite a few decades. And they led multiple campaigns against the Mughal Empire, the Marathas, and the Ashford. Ahmad invaded India 8 times, and he met different armies of the Mughals, captured many cities like Lahore, Punjab. But his biggest victory, though, helped create the vacuum in northern India. Of course, he died in 1772, and a war succession followed, with his successor defeating his brother. Of course, by the 19th century, the Afghan Empire was under threat from multiple powers. The Persians to the west, the Sikh Empire to the east, were facing multiple threats. Of course, when the Durrani Empire collapsed in the 19th century, of course, this all attracted the attention of the British. You see, the British were quite interested in wanting to look at Afghanistan. And they actually invaded this area in 1839 and seized Kabul. However, it didn't become a part of Britain's empire, because it turns out the British had to retreat from Afghanistan in 1842. And of course, while they did try to conquer this area, eventually in 1857, Britain and Afghanistan have started the relations. And the main reason they wanted to look at Afghanistan is because it's a buffer between them and Russia. At that time, India was part of Britain's. India and Pakistan were all part of the British Raj, while the Russians had much control of much of Central Asia, with countries like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, the Uzbeks, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan as part of Russia's empire. So they needed some sort of buffer to prevent India from being invaded, so Afghanistan became a big part of it. Of course, Dost Muhammad did a lot of campaigns to unite Afghanistan, and he would end up succeeding in reunifying Afghanistan. Of course, during World War I, Afghanistan was pretty much neutral, and while there were attempts to get them to sway, ultimately, they remained neutral. Of course, after the end of the Third Anglo-Afghan War in 1919, the Emirate of Afghanistan was declared as a fully sovereign independent state. It moved, trying to end his isolation between across the world. And he did many reforms, including the abolition of burqa for women, opening co-ed schools. However, he also alienated many tribal and religious leaders, leading to an Afghan civil war. Muhammad Zahir Shah succeeded the throne and reigned from 1933 to 1973. And Zahir, like his father, wanted to maintain independence and gradual modernization. Unfortunately, while he was in Italy, Jahad Khan launched a coup and became the first president of Afghanistan and abolished the monarchy. And it became a republic. However, unfortunately for Afghanistan, that might have been not be a good thing, because only just 5 years later, the People's Democratic Party seized power in a coup d'etat and established the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. And that was the beginning of many terrible things to happen in Afghanistan ever since. You know why? Because it turned out it launched the conflict for the next 50 years of conflict. Of course, the PDA, the Democratic Party, initiated various social, symbiotic, and land distribution reform that provoked strong opposition while brutally pressing political distance. It eventually caused unrest, and it launched into a state of civil war between guerrilla mujahideen against regime forces, and it transformed into a proxy war as the Pakistanis got involved. Then the U.S. supported Pakistan, and of course the Soviets sent thousands of advisors to the regime. And then in 1979, the big thing finally happened. Secretary Trotsky was assassinated in a internal coup, and the Soviets invaded the country not far after the coup, launching the Soviet-Afghan War, which absolutely decimated a lot of Afghanistan. It took 9 years for this war to happen, and it displaced nearly 562,000 to 2 million Afghans, and around 6 million people fled the country to either Afghanistan or Iran. And many cities were heavily bombarded, destroyed many countryside villages, millions of landmines were planted, and they're still probably on the ground today. And many historic cities like Herat and Kandahar were completely damaged from bombardments. Of course, as soon as the Soviets left, guess what took the place of that? Another civil war happened. And eventually the communist regime collapsed in 1992, and again, it still has effects in Afghanistan even today. Of course, afterwards, then another civil war happened, and after the creation of another dysfunctional government, various mujahideen factions committed widespread rape, murder, and extortion while Kabul was heavily bombed. And emerging from the ashes of all this was the group known as the Taliban. And they were as a movement and militia of students from the Islamic schools in Pakistan. And eventually took control of the city of Kandahar that year. Continued to go more and more for the next 2 years until they took Kabul in 1996 and established it as an emirate. Of course, this wasn't still over yet. And of course, during the rule, the Taliban committed massacres against citizens, denied food supplies, and scorched earth policy, burning areas of land and destroying homes. Of course, there are still parts of alliances to prevent the Taliban from trying to rule over this area in the north. But of course, then another event happened. You should probably know about September 11, 2001, 9/11. And of course, when Osama bin Laden, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan in October to remove the Taliban because of Osama bin Laden, the prime suspect of the September 11 attacks, who was operating from Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Of course, during the initial invasion, the U.S. bombed Al-Qaeda training camps and later worked with the New Alliance to end the Taliban. In 2 months, the Taliban government was overthrown and it was controlled by the interim administration. And they were the ones that ruled Afghanistan from 2004 until 2021 when they collapsed. There were attempts made to improve the country's economy, healthcare, education, transport, and agriculture. But of course, nothing was going to last forever as of course, the U.S. Taliban deal was made in Qatar in 2020. And it was one of the critical events that caused the collapse of the Afghan National Security Forces because signing the deal, the U.S. reduced the number of air attacks and deprived the ANSF an edge in fighting off the Taliban, which eventually led to the Taliban returning back to power in 2021 as they took the city of Kabul August 15th and retained control of much of Afghanistan. And currently, as of today, the country is ruled by Supreme Leader Hibatullah Akhundzada, his Prime Minister Hassan Akhund. Of course, that still goes on even. So that wraps up a bit of the history of Afghanistan. Yeah, it's a long and turbulent history. Normally, as Afghanistan was a major crossroads of many civilizations. Persian-Iranian civilization, Indian civilization, Central Asia. So lots of different ideas and ideologies. Yes, Taliban stand. Yeah, that's probably pretty much true. You got that right, Tyler. Let's look outside here today. let's just fly over the scenery here, and it's definitely pretty gorgeous. So yeah, the scenery here is definitely crazy though. It's very, very mountainous. Not a surprise. This area is very, very mountainous. But definitely a very, very interesting area to fly over. So, if you guys wanted to know why I've been wanting to remake the All Country series, I think the thing was A, the new sim was coming out. But the reason I wanted to redo and reboot this series in a different way is because I felt like if I did it around the world, like just travel from one country to another, it would have taken forever and it would have limited what types of planes I could fly, and it also limited what kind of routes I could do. So that's why I wanted to reboot this series and start with each country alphabetically. Starting with Afghanistan, and then we're going to go all the way down. But that's why I wanted to reboot the series. That way we could fly all sorts of different planes. We could fly GA, like we could fly this bad boy here for some of the more high altitude areas. We could do slower planes in some of the smaller countries. We could take slower aircraft. We could take some of the smaller aircraft for some of those shorter flights. But I think that would be pretty cool, and I'm pretty much excited to do that sort of thing. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to I'm looking forward to doing this as well. So of course, this week, if you guys know this week's streams, this week we'll be doing on Sunday we'll be doing our first National Park Series stream. We're going to be doing the prologue. We'll cover the history of the National Park Service as we fly from Boise over to Boot. We'll be doing some GA aircraft. We'll probably take the X Cub for it. We'll take the NX Cub, and we'll be flying away to Boot. And then we'll explore all across Yellowstone. Oh yeah, South 340. And when's that? Sunday. Yes, that's going to be on Sunday. It's on my Discord, by the way. But yeah, it's going to be this Sunday. We're excited to get this series started, of course. This was the big one I really wanted to get started. Let's talk a little bit more about Afghanistan, of course. Cover a bit more about the country a bit. So, geographically speaking, Afghanistan is located in South Central Asia, and it's known as the crossroads of Asia, and it's known as the heart of the entire continent. Of course, it's the world's 41st largest country at 652,000 square miles. It's slightly bigger than the country of France, smaller than Myanmar, and it's about the same size as the U.S. state of Texas. So yes, this is actually a pretty big country. But of course, one thing that really makes Afghanistan pretty unique is it's how varied the geography is. It is mostly mountainous and rugged, but there are some unique mountain ridges with plateaus and river basins. Much of the country is dominated by the Hindu Kush Range, the western extension of the Himalayas, which stretches from eastern Tibet to it stretches all the way to eastern Tibet. And some of the most highest points are in the east, consistent of the fertile mountain valleys, and it's called the roof of the world. There are some parts of Afghanistan that are definitely fitting that name. Despite having numerous rivers and reservoirs, much of the country is dry. And one of the driest regions of the world is the Sistan Basin, one of the driest areas of the world. In the country, 2% of the land area is covered by forest. And of course, in the northeast, you can find is a very geologically active area. Earthquakes may occur here every year, and some of these cause deadly and destructive landslides and even avalanches. So yes, this area is very unique geographically. Of course, in terms of climate, Afghanistan is continental climate with harsh winters in the central highlands, the glacier northeast, in the Wakhan corridor, which is the border that connects Afghanistan to China, where average temperatures can reach below 5 degrees Fahrenheit and can reach -15 in hot summers in the low-lying area of the southwest Sistan Basin in the Jalbahan Basin, where temperatures could go over 100 degrees Fahrenheit daily. It's generally arid in the summers, with most rainfall between December and April. The lower areas in northern and west Afghanistan are the driest. Although Afghanistan's contributed minimally to global greenhouse emissions, it is actually one of our most vulnerable countries to climate change, and it's actually the least prepared to cope with its impacts, as it causes more frequent and severe droughts, which affect over half the population. So, yes, climate change can actually greatly negatively affect Afghanistan. So, that's definitely something to keep an eye on when we go over Afghanistan. And in terms of biodiversity, there are actually quite a few types of animals to live in Afghanistan. You can find in the high elevation region, you can find snow leopards, Siberian tigers. Yes, Siberian tigers might actually be found in this region. I don't know why they said Siberian tigers. But tigers, there are actually tiger species that do live in some parts of Afghanistan. I believe they're and the reason was because some of the animals were transferred from Persian tigers, Caspian. But they also have other animals, and brown bears even live in this region. Yeah, brown bears. Of course, small animals like foxes, wolves, otters, deer, sheep, lynx, and other big cats populate much of the mountain forest region to the east. In the desert, you can find birds, hedgehogs, gophers, and jackals around the semi-dead northern plains. Steppes, you can find gazelles, wild pigs, and mongoose. And of course, all that. Some of the endemic fauna include the Afghan flying squirrel, the Afghan snowfinch, Afghan leopard gecko, and more. And despite its arid climate, Afghanistan is home to over 460 species of birds live in Afghanistan. In terms of plant life, the forest region of Afghanistan has prime vegetation by pine trees, trees, spruce, fir trees, and larches, while steppe grasslands contain broadleaf trees, short grass, perennial plants, and shrubland. So yeah, despite this being pretty arid, there is home to some wildlife and stuff found in. Pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff. So, definitely pretty cool stuff. To learn more about Afghanistan. Yeah, look at the scenery. How cool is that, guys? The scenery here looks pretty cool. Yeah, the reason I also did 2 legs is because the reason I did 2 legs for this stream is because also as well, this being pretty mountainous and there's not a lot of major cities, it's pretty remote. I wanted to cover 2 different. Pretty important stuff. Of course, our next country will be going next week. Will be the European country of Albania. So I'll be posting some information about Albania after the weekend's over. I'll post plenty of information about Albania, and I'll post some information about it. Very excited to check out Albania next week. Something a bit more normal compared to Afghanistan. So we'll cover that in a second. So, the next part of Afghanistan we'll be talking about here today is its government, of course. And of course, it used to have a democratic government. However, nowadays, it's now ruled by the entirety of the Taliban. It's now an Islamic emirate. And of course, it was announced, and as of 2025, only one country has recognized it. The Russians, actually, funnily enough. It's Russia who recognized the government of Afghanistan as the bylaw government. According to the V Democracy Indices 2023, it is the 3rd least democratic country in all of Asia. So you know who's the 2 least democratic countries in Asia? Besides the Afghanistan? Saudi Arabia and China. Yes, you've heard that right. In terms of electoral democracies, it is actually less democratic. It's actually less democratic than North Korea and Myanmar. Yeah, those 2. Crazy enough. The most democratic country, by the way, in Asia is Japan. Japan and Taiwan are the 2 most democratic areas in Asia. So yeah, they are not democratic at all. Under the leadership of the Taliban, the government is a theocracy and an emirate with political power concentrated in the hands of a supreme leader and his clerical advisors. Known as the leadership, they make all policy decisions behind closed door and implemented by the country's civil service and judiciary. And of course, the government has a lot of human rights issues. I mean, where do you begin with it? Of course, women are all required to wear full body coverings. Is not good. There you go. Oh yeah, in Turkmenistan, yes, that too. Yes, Turkmenistan's also that. Yes, it's a hermit kingdom. Yes, very much the same way. Of course, in terms of Afghanistan a bit, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the slides for a minute. So, of course, with our National Park series, after this week, I'm also going to post Yellowstone, the first national park. I'll have a video for Yellowstone. But Yellowstone National Park is our first national park we'll be covering. That'll be next Sunday. Looking forward to that, of course. Pretty big stuff as always. But The scenery here is really cool, though. All the mountains and stuff. Definitely, the scenery in Afghanistan is definitely great. With all the mountain ranges and stuff, it really stands out. That'll be very interesting as well. Over here. So, of course, there really isn't too much going on in terms of news as well. But I do have some pretty important stuff. Louisville City is going to be back on Saturday night. Huge game against Charleston. That may be the game of the year against Charleston. Might be the game of the year against the second best team in the league in Charleston. This should be a huge game tomorrow night. A win here will set up the team nicely. So that's my news from Louisville City. College football, of course. That's going to be starting August 23rd, Louisville this year. I think the Cardinals are probably going to win 10 games this year. That's who I think Louisville's going to have a record this year. I'm looking at the schedule. They're going to get a win versus Eastern Kentucky. James Madison and Joel Green are all wins. Then they're going to probably beat Pittsburgh. Virginia's not very good, so they beat Virginia. Miami, the U is a bit of a toss-up. Boston College is more likely to win. Virginia Tech's a bit of a toss-up. I think they win fairly. They beat Cal. Clemson is probably going to be a loss. Clemson is still an extremely good team. SMU is a toss-up, and then I think they beat Kentucky. I think more likely they win 10 or 11 games. They get back to the ACC championship, probably. But yeah, I do think Louisville's going to be in a good position next season. I don't think the schedule's that bad. So I have the Cards probably do pretty well. As for IU football, oh boy, IU football, that's going to be even harder for IU. I think they definitely wins over Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. Those are all wins, but man, Illinois is a toss-up. They're a very, very good team. Iowa's a toss-up. They're definitely losing to Oregon. Michigan State's probably a win. UCLA, bit of a win. They beat Maryland. They lose to Penn State. Toss-up with Wisconsin, but more likely to win. And they'll definitely be Purdue. Purdue's terrible last year. So I do think the Hoosiers do pretty good next season. But man, it's a bit tougher than Louisville. That's for sure. Definitely a tougher schedule. So. Definitely a very tough schedule for. Of course, in terms of some of the other leagues are currently playing. I think the first championship match is going to be playing this week. Birmingham City versus Ipswich Town today. So of course, some people predicted the Champions League, but for the EFL Championship, who do I think is getting promoted to the Premier League next year? I think Ipswich Town's going to get promoted. I think they're still too good for the lower tier, and I think Southampton. I think my top predictions is the team that's getting promoted is going to be, if I'm being honest, it's going to be Ipswich, Southampton, and Leicester are getting promoted. And then relegated is going to be Sheffield Wednesday is definitely getting relegated. Sheffield Wednesday is definitely getting relegated. That their situation is tragic. They're definitely going. I think Derby County and Hull C are probably going to go down. That's just from what I read. As of for the Premier League, my prediction is I definitely think Liverpool's winning this league. They're going to probably run away with it. It's going to be Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester City in the top 3. And I guess the rest of the top 5 would be Chelsea. Chelsea's definitely in there. Still a really good club. And then the last one is probably going to be... I don't think it's Newcastle. They lost quite a bit. I'm going to say Aston Villa. I think Villa's going to be 5th this year. As for who I think is going to get relegated from the Premier League, I think it's going to be Burnley. They're definitely going down. I think it's Burnley. I think it's Brentford. And barely getting relegated is probably Sunderland. I think Leeds are going to Premier League. I just think Brentford lost so much this offseason. Brentford's going to have a rough season. Lost a coach, too. That special hurt. I think that's... And I think the top is going to remain at the top. Play for another year. I'm going to go ahead and go down to the 7,000 feet. I'm going to go ahead and descend down to 7,000 feet. Prepare for our first lane of the day. We're going to descend down to 7,000 feet. Go ahead and descend down to 7,000. So we're going to stop here at Oscar Hotel Tango November. Oscar Alpha Tango November. That is Turin Airport. So, of course, I'm working on notes for a new series in the future after the National Park series. I'm going back to more of my roots in the next series after the National Parks, which is going to cover sports rivalries from across the globe. And I'll be doing that one going back to my roots. So I've already picked out some rivalries we'll be covering here from sports. But basically the whole gist about it, I got the title for the series. But basically this one here is called Reveling in the Rivalry, which is sports rivalries across the world. And I got a lot of sports rivalries I'm planning on doing, so I got a whole document of them. But basically, they're famous sports rivalries from across the world. I got them for every continent. So I'm planning to do at least one from every continent. But some of these are bigger than others. And I think that's what I'm going to be planning to do in the future. But I got some really big ones. I got 2 from Africa planned. I got quite a few from Asia planned out. I got some from Asia, of course. Got those two planned. But I got most of them are either from Europe or North America. Europe's got a ton of them. I got at least 3 from Spain. I got quite a few from England and Italy. And of course, in the North America, I got quite a few from Canada, the United States. And I do have a few from Canada in the United States. Canada, I mainly got the 2 big Canadian rivalries, Montreal-Toronto and Calgary-Edmonton. Those are 2 very big ones in Canada. I got 1 from Mexico. I got quite a few from the United States, including 2 baseball rivalries, 2 basketball rivalries, a couple of college football games. I got an NFL rivalry as well, and possibly 1 MLS rivalry as well in the MLS. I got 1 from Australia, 1 or 2 from Australia, and then of course South America's got some big ones. I'm going to be planning on doing that. I thought that would be a fun little thing, and it would get me back to a bit more of my roots. Because remember, sports was what really built my channel back when I did my first flight sim. So having that back is a pretty big. Pretty cool to bring that back, of course. Slightly. Also, by the way, a bit of other stuff too. I've actually got FS Hub Premium now, so I now have access to Aero Economy. Bobby gifted it to me last week. And I've been absolutely loving the new Aero Economy. It's everything I wanted it to be. Yeah, absolutely love it. It's just great that I can finally do some economy stuff, which I've always wanted to do in Flight Sim. Didn't want to pay for a lot of it, so this was definitely a very nice gift. Here we go, guys. Our first landing of the day. park here for just a bit as we land in our first stop of the day at Oscar Alpha Tango November. So we'll be parked here for just a bit if anyone else wants to join on in, of course. But yeah, really cool stuff. I'll show you guys some other time, but really cool though. Air economy is neat. I'm very happy to have that. So we're gonna get ready to take on for our last stop in Kabul. Our second and last stop will be making our way to Kabul. So we're gonna go ahead and prepare to take off here. We're gonna go taxi back to Winter. So our hand's gonna be 51 degrees. Here we go, guys. We're gonna fly all the way back up to the 16,000 feet once again. We're gonna fly up 2,000 feet in a minute. So let's have the next part about Afghanistan for a bit, and that's economically speaking. So Afghanistan's economy as of 2020 was 20 billion US dollars, which is not a lot. Or by person pound per 81 billion. Its GDP per capita is at a very small $2,459,000 by purchase power parity. Despite having more than $1 trillion in mineral deposits, it's one of the world's least developed countries. It makes sense because of its rough physical geography, it's very mountainous, it's landlocked, and then, of course, you can't forget about the conflict and political instability over the past 50 years. The country imports over $7 billion of goods, but it only exports only $784 million of goods, mainly fruits and nuts, and it's over $2 billion of debt. Most of the economy is attributed by service sector, followed by agriculture and industry are the big parts of it. Now, of course, it is actually recovering a bit, thanks to the return of over 5 million expats, which brought up an entrepreneurship and well-created skills to fund many businesses. And now many Afghans are involved in construction, which is one of the largest industries in the country, to build a new city near Jalalabad in Kandahar. Several small factories and factories have operated in different parts of the country, which provide revenue to the government and new jobs. Also, Afghan rugs are now popular again, and many carpenters have actually worked in the 2010s. Of course, ever since the Taliban's takeover, the U.S. froze about $9 billion of assets belonging to the Afghan Central Bank for blocking the Taliban from accessing billions of dollars held in U.S. bank accounts. And the GDP of Afghanistan has been reduced by around 20% since the Taliban took back power. Of course, after months of free-fall, the Afghan economy stabilized again thanks to its restrictions on small imports, limits on banking transactions, and UN aid. And of course, in 2023, oddly enough, the economy in Afghanistan has been seeing revival, thanks to stable exchange rates, low inflation, stable revenue, and rise of trade and export. So it has been going up, oddly enough, despite the Taliban rule. Which is kind of weird. Of course, agriculturally speaking, agriculture has been a big part of its economy and traditionally dominated much of the economy, employing about 40% of the workforce. The country is known for producing pomegranates, grapes, apricots, melons, and several other fresh and dry fruits. And it's also the world's top producer of cannabis. However, it was banned in 2023 by decree from the Taliban leader Hibatullah Akhundzada. The world's most expensive spice actually grows in the country. Saffron is the world's most expensive spice produced in and around the Herat province. And has been a lot of uptick in saffron production as farmers will try to use it to replace poppy cultivation of poppies. Saffron cultivated is ranked among the world's best, and production hit record high for in 2019. And 1 kilogram is sold domestically between $634 to $1,100 for saffron. Of course, the availability of cheap diesel powered water pumps imported from China and Pakistan has actually resulted in agricultural expansion in the population to increase in the 2010s. But water resources are limited. Opium is one major crop, but it's under attack by the Taliban government to suppress opium production. So, as a result, Afghanistan was now no longer the largest opium producer of opium. Of course, the crazy thing is that Afghanistan has a lot of Afghanistan's rich in natural resources. The country includes that of coal, copper, iron ore, lithium, uranium, rare earth elements, bromine, gold, zinc, talc, ferrite, sulfur, lead, marble, precious and precious metals, natural gas, and petroleum. Apparently, according to the United States Geological Survey, the mineral deposits are untapped mineral deposits are worth at least $1 trillion US. and there's a lot of reserves of natural gas and oil. Of course, it has significant amounts of lithium, copper, gold, and other materials, which is extremely important. That's why China wants to get involved in it. And apparently, Afghanistan has at least 30% of the country's mineral deposits. Afghanistan would once be the Afghan economy would be mining. And apparently, they have so much lithium. They call it the Saudi Arabia of lithium due to the massive lithium, along with that of Bolivia, which is a pretty big deal. Of course, access to the biocapacity of Afghanistan is lower than the world average, meaning all that as well. And of course, in 2023, the Taliban also had mine contracts worth $6 billion. The oddly thing enough is tourism, and here's the odd thing: is tourism. It is actually a pretty small industry due to all the security issues. So for some reason, as of 2016, some 20,000 tourists visit the country. 20,000 foreign tourists visit. It's because, well, Afghanistan still has beautiful lakes, canyons, and historical sites. And it's mainly in the Bamyan Valley, which is safe from a lot of insurgent activity. Small numbers visit the Wakhan Valley as well, home to some of the most remote communities. At one point, the height of it was the 60s. As it was a popular stop on the hippie trail, attracting many Europeans and Americans. It made them come to Iran. It peaked in 1977 before instability and conflict. There's also tons of historical sites in many cities, especially in Ghazni. Are very historic areas, been voted the Islamic cultural capital. And many cities were very historic and part of UNESCO World Heritage. Here's the funny thing. Here's the hilarious thing. Tourism has actually seen better improvements following the Taliban takeover. What? I'm not kidding. The reason is because the Taliban actually encourages people to visit the country. In fact, in 2023, 5,200 people visited it. However, a lot of it's threatened by the Islamic State province, which are responsible for attacking a lot of tourists. But yes, there are tourists who actually visit the country. As crazy as it is. I guess that's one thing this area is better than North Korea. So let's take a look at our screenshot. Look at the mountains here. Now we're getting to the more snow-capped regions of the country. How cool is that, guys? Look at the scenery. Oh, pretty cool stuff. Definitely stunning scenery out here in the mountains. Just stunning scenery. Mountains. But yeah, looking forward to this weekend. I know Mert's gonna be back. He'll be on later today. He'll be doing a flight in the Albatross. He's gonna be flying over Antarctica, I believe. He's gonna be flying from South Georgia Island into Antarctica, which is definitely pretty cool. Of course, then Saturday, Allison's gonna be back. She'll be doing another historical flight recreation. She'll be doing one from Russia once again. Um, she'll be doing from Olkhot, Russia to Magadan. She'll continue doing her helicopter flights. She'll get back to the United States at some point during this time period. Definitely check out Allison's stream as well. Go forward. But man, this scene is really cool. So if you guys want to look at the flight plan for Albania next week, I'm going to let you show you what it looks like. Let me load the Albania flight plan. Just to let you guys look at it for a bit. This is Albania next week. As you can tell, we're mainly flying around the country's borders, but basically it's a circle, near circle. We'll fly. We'll start from Gajatar. We're gonna fly north over to here. We'll go through the Albanian Alps. Check out all these parts, the Vavona Valley, which is a pretty stunning area, of course. And once we get through that, we'll stop at Kukis Airport for the first stop. Then number 2, we'll fly through Mount Korab, check out through more of Albania's hills and stuff. Make our way to Lake Ohrid, make our landing at Lima Alpha Kilo Victor. And then for the last leg, we'll go visit the capital city of Albania. Check it out, Tirana. And we'll stop at Tirana International Airport. But yeah, that is basically what we're going to be in Albania. It's not very big, so we just flew around the entire country. That's going to be next week, which I'm very excited to do as well. Go over that area too. And trust me, if you want to talk about hermit states back in the Cold War, Typhon, Albania was absolutely the bunker state. You'll learn all about what Albania looked like in the Cold War. So we'll learn more about that when we get. So I'm going to go ahead and cover a couple more slides. In terms of transportation, again, Afghanistan's transportation is a very tricky one. Due to its geography, transport between various parts of the country has been very difficult. The backbone of Afghan's transportation road network is Highway 1, the Ring Road, which extends 1,300 miles and connects the 5 major cities of Kabul, Ghazni, Kandahar, Herat, and Mazar-e-Sharif, which spurs to other areas and border crossing, and it's been very important for both domestic and international trade and for the economy. A key portion of it is the Salong Tunnel, which was completed in 1964, and it travels through the Hindu Kush mountain range. And it's the only land route to connect Central Asia to the Indian subcontinent. Of course, in the air, it's provided by the Air National Carrier Ariana Afghan Airlines and private company Comair. And there are airlines from a number of countries to provide flights in the country. There's 4 major international airports, but the biggest one is Kabul. Private vehicle ownership has increased over since the early 2000s, and with taxis, auto rickshaws. In rural areas, villages often use donkeys, mules, or horses to transport goods. And some nomads even use camels still. And of course, bicycles are very popular all across the country. Bicycles. I did mention the language, of course, but Afghanistan's language, there's multiple different groups and ethnic groups in the country. The largest ethnic group in Afghanistan, by the way, are the Pashtuns, which are 42% of Afghanistan's population. Then the next other major groups are the Tajiks at 27%, the Hazaras at 9%, and the Uzbeks at 9%. The official language of Afghanistan, there's actually 2 official languages, Dari and Pashto, which references the different Afghan. Dari is very similar to that of Persian or Farsi, and Pashto is Indo-European language. It's the native tongue of the Pashtun. Pashtuns have been mainly dominated a lot of politics. However, the language for government bureaucracy is in Dari. So pretty interesting stuff. And of course, Islam is the dominant religion in the country. Is Islam. 99% of the population is Muslim. Up there. Hey, Devil Dude, good to see ya. Oh, nice, Devil Dude. That's great to hear. I hope you're doing well, Devil Dude. It's been a while since I've seen you in my chat. I hope you're doing well, my dude. So yeah, we finally got my new series started. Nice to hear you got hubs in Nice, Sarajevo, Algiers, Marrakesh, Dakar, Kampala, Lusaka, Johannesburg. Nice. Fantastic. Oh, cool. I'm glad to hear about that. Yeah, it's good to see you again, Devil Dude. Like I said, it's great to see you. The scenery here is pretty crazy. All these are mountains, by the way. And it's good TT hubs. No worries. Let's go over to another part of slideshow. Now, of course, is Afghanistan's culture. I know a lot of you thinking, of course, about the Taliban, and everyone thinks it's pretty Islamic. However, a lot of people overlook that Afghanistan is actually a very culturally rich country. And again, those traditions have been back for tens of thousands of years. Afghans have both common cultural features with those from the different regions, with each distinct culture thanks to its geographic obstacle. Family is the mainstay of the Afghan society, and families are often headed by a patriarch. In the southern eastern regions, people live by the Pashtun cultures by following the Pashtun ways, include hospitality, sanctuary for those seeking refuge, and revenge for shedding of blood, and are largely connected to those of Central Asia and the Orion Plateau. Afghans, particularly those Pashtuns, are known for their tribal solidarity and high regard for personal honor, and there are various Afghan tribes that are around 2 to 3 million nomads. The culture of Afghanistan is very deeply Islamic. However, still, despite all of it, pre-Islamic practices still persist in the country, even to today. Today, of course, Afghan clothing for both men and women consists of various forms of shalwar kameez, especially those for tunban for men, and kahat partang for women, Pashtun clothing. And that leads to some of the different clothing. Oh yeah, I guess your computer didn't really work well for 2024. Sorry to hear about that. I know some people had issues with 24, and that's fine. In terms of architecture, Afghanistan has a complex history that survived in its current cultures or varies language and monuments. Afghanistan has many remnants from all ages, including some from the Greek and Buddhist eras, monasteries, monuments, temples, and Islamic minarets. Among the most famous structures in Afghanistan include the Grand Mosque of Herat, which was built around 1200 CE, the Blue Mosque in Mazar al-Sharif, the Minaret of Jim, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in West Afghanistan, and the Chil Zena, as well as the ancient Greek city of Al-Kahun, are all major heritage sites. However, sadly, many of these historic monuments were damaged due to the civil wars. Most famously or infamously, depending on who you ask, the Buddhas of Bamiyan were destroyed by the Taliban due to them being idolatries, because Islam is not very tolerant of that sort of stuff. Due to the fact there's no colonialism in Afghanistan, European style architecture is rare, but there are still some that does exist. Afghanistan also has a rich art history, also rich in arts. Carved weaving's been a long time an ancient practice in Afghanistan, and many of them are still handmade by tribal and nomadic people today. Carvings have been produced in the region for thousands of years and traditionally done by women. Some crafters express their feelings through the design of rugs. For example, many of them represent pain and misery due to conflict, and every province has its own characteristic in rug making. Pottery has also been a big deal in the country for millennia. One particular village, north of Kabul, Istalif, is a major center known for its unique turquoise and green pottery, and have remained the same throughout the entire century. Much of lapis stones were actually earthed in Afghanistan, and were used all over for different potteries. And the lands also have rich art history too, with oil painting. So yeah, Afghanistan again, very rich in a lot of history. Yeah, 4 gigabytes of VRAM is a bit low though. Yeah, I understand. Maybe someday you get a nicer computer, maybe 2024 get to be stable enough. Of course, music. Now, this is an interesting part about it. Now, of course, in classical music has close ties to that of Indian music and uses the same Hindustani terminology and theories like raga. Some of them include poetic music called ghazal, with instruments such as the Indian tabla, sitar, and harmonium, as well as own local instruments too. The national instrument is the rubab, which is a type of string instrument from Central Asia. It's like a lute. That's what it basically is. Pop music developed in the 50s, ready to Kabul, and was a big part of societal change in the 50s. The most famous author in that artist in that genre was Ahmad Zahir. He was still renowned in the region for his voice and rich lyrics until his death in 1979. He was known as the Elvis of Afghanistan. And the national dance is Adhan, which is popularized and performed by all backgrounds of Afghan. A major part of its identity. Of course, you guys all know about music. The Taliban have banned music. It's considered prohibited in Afghanistan. That means it's a strict ban, particularly at weddings, social gathering, and radio television. Yeah, they do not treat music very well. So there's that too. In terms of Afghanistan, its cuisine is also pretty important, and a lot of it is based on its major crops. And of course, Afghan cuisine is a mix of various different ones, influenced by Persian, Central Asian, and South Asian cuisines due to its close proximity and cultural ties. Um, its cuisine, by the way, is halal, and basically halal is it is associated with dietary of Islamic diet. It has to fit certain guidelines, but it's mainly based on mutton, beef, poultry, and fish with rice and Afghan bread. However, that means there's no pork in the menu because it's Islamic. Islam, along with Judaism, does not allow pork. Accompanying these are also vegetables and dairy products like milk, yogurt, way. And of course, most of Afghans dine around rice-based dishes, while forms of bread are consumed with most meals. The main drink is tea, of course. It's drink in large quantities. The national dish of Afghanistan is Kabul Palau, rice dish cooked with raisins, carrots, nut, lamb, or beef. The national is the national dish. But they eat all sorts of stuff too. There's also sub-cuisines from the Pashtun and Hazara people have their own little cuisine. Well, definitely some pretty interesting stuff here too. In terms of holidays and festivals, every New Year starts with Nowruz, which is an Indian tradition that started all the way back as a Zoroastrian celebration in Iran. And despite being an Islamic country, Nowruz is still celebrated across all of Afghanistan. Another ancient tradition as well that survived even the Islamization is Yalda, which is the longest night of the year and the eve of winter solstice, where families gather together and recite poetry and eat fruits. Of course, being a Muslim country, Islamic events and festivals such as Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr, and Ashura are celebrated widely in the country. The Sikh festival of Vaskani is celebrated by the Sikh community in Afghanistan, and the Hindu festival of Diwali by the Hindu community. And the National Independence Day is celebrated on August 19th to mark the Anglo-Afghan Treaty of 18 in full independence. And finally, for culture, the last thing for culture I want to talk about briefly is sports. So, sport is managed by the Afghan Sports Federation. The main sport in Afghanistan, the two most popular sports in the country, are cricket and association football. Of course, other sports like include basketball, volleyball, golf, handball, taekwondo, and more. But the big part has been cricket. They've actually won several intercontinental tournaments and cups throughout the years. And domestically, cricket's played by teams of different provinces, mainly play. But of course, the traditional and national sport of Afghanistan is buzkashi, which is mainly popular in the northern region of Afghanistan. This sport is very similar to that of polo, played by horsemen in two teams, each trying to grab and hold a goat carcass. And it's a traditional sport that's put for a lot of the nomads. Apparently, it's been around since the 10th to 15th century. It's played in many other sports, including that of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. But of course, it's a national sport of Afghanistan. So, pretty important stuff, and that concludes Afghanistan's cultural stuff. And that concludes Afghanistan in its cultural heritage. But yeah, I know a lot of people think the Taliban are a big part, and that's probably true. But Afghanistan is an area with a lot of rich culture and heritage. It's just, it's sadly been greatly overshadowed by the Taliban. We're going to be heading our way to Kabul for our last stop. So we're flying over a lot of the mountains and stuff, of course. So thank you guys so much for coming here today on the start of this new series. I'm very happy to get this series underway. So, very, very... Have you located the names of all the countries around this area before the current names? Good question. Afghanistan was much of a site for many empires over the years. And I mean, there were many, many empires that have been part of Afghanistan. Where do I even begin with this? You have this area was taken by the Persians. Then the Alexander's Macedonian Empire took this area. Then it became part of the Seleucid state. Then, of course, by the Indo-Greek kingdom. And of course, the Parthians took over this area. The Kushans, Sassanids, Hittites, Hephthalites, the Shani dynasty. Part of the Timurid Empire, this area part of the Timurids, Otax, the long time been the Draconis. It didn't become modern Afghanistan until 1919, when it became fully independent. But yeah, this area has been a crossroads of many, many empires. Yes, it used to be green too, until all the tectonic plates and stuff probably moved up from India. Caused a lot of this to happen. So, yeah, this is part one. Yeah, this is only just part one. We got over 200 countries to visit. I joined you after 6 months. Yes, I did a previous series, by the way, Devil Dude. I did a previous series, by the way. It's called 50 States and 50 Streams. I just finished that one just last week. So if you click my YouTube or something, it's got the VODs for my last series. So, you can take a look at that in the YouTube. But yes, that is the old series I did. I did all 50 states, by the way, from Delaware to Hawaii. I got all of that done. Let's go ahead and cover the last slides we need to cover here today, and we're going to talk about Kabul for a bit. Kabul is the capital and largest city in the country. The city is around 4.95 million people. In contemporary times, it serves as Afghanistan's political, cultural, and economic center. Rapid urbanization made this one of the largest cities in the world. Of course, Kabul has been around for over 3,500 years. It was mentioned at the time of the old Achaemenid Empire, and located in the crossroads in Asia. It's halfway between Istanbul and Hanoi, Vietnam. As a result, it was a major key destination of the Silk Road, connecting a lot of India, Persia, and more. Over the centuries, Kabul has been ruled by various dynasties and empires: Seleucids, Bactrian Greeks, Kushans, Western Turks, Samanids, Timurids, Mongols, and more. Of course, Kabul is most well known for its historical gardens, bazaars, and palaces, such as the gardens of Babur, the Darul Aman Palace, and the Ark. Of course, this city was a major stop at the hippie trail and gained the Paris of Central Asia. Sadly, that tranquility ended in 1978, and for the next 5 decades after 1979, this city was bombed and heavily damaged by all the wars and conflicts over the next 50 years. Most recently, the Taliban took it back over the city in 2021. So, yeah, Kabul was a major part of it. It's got a rich history as well. And there are tons of landmarks in this city. Bazaars, it's got lots of markets. You got the Darul Palace and the tomb of Emperor Babur are a big part of it too. There's definitely a lot of historical stuff here, and it's got rich architectural stuff. Again, a lot of this was heavily damaged by the way. The international airport we're flying to today is Kabul International Airport, the biggest airport in Afghanistan. It was opened. It was opened back in the 1920s, and it's been around since then. But it really grew modern in the 60s by Soviet engineers. And of course, the airport was then used by the Soviet Army during the Soviet-Afghan War and military forces of the former president. And the Taliban took control of it in 1996. Then the U.S. controlled it, took it back in 2001. But of course, this airport was bombed a few times by the U.S. And the airport was then redeveloped. Of course, it then returned back to the Taliban in 2021. So prior to the Taliban taking over, this country had flights from China, India, Iran, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkey, Uzbekistan, and the Persian Gulf. And the most frequent service part of it was Dubai. So, of course, sitting at altitude at 5,800 feet level, it's surrounded by parts of the Hindu Kush Mountains and served as a hub for Ariana Airlines and Calm Air. Just to name a few, but yeah, more than a year ago, you're playing Trackmania. I don't blame you. So we're about to enter Kabul. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna set this down around. I guess we're gonna go down. Here we go. We'll fly over the city of Kabul, and we're gonna make our way down. Thank you all so much for coming here today. And I'm happy to get this new series finally started. So we'll be going. This will probably last us a few years, probably to 2028. No joke, because we're going to be doing over 200 countries. It's going to be. We might even get this to MSFS 2028 when this series starts again in 2028. I'm not kidding. But hey, I wanted a long-term series, and I wanted to do this. Here you go. We'll fly over Kabul for a bit. This is the city of Kabul. This is all part of the Kabul metro. I was with my aunt at the funny park. Oh, nice. Hope you have a good time with your aunt, Super Typhon. Don't worry. I'll take care of things. If it's easy, I'll happen to take care of things for you. This is Kabul, by the way, capital's largest city in Afghanistan. Here it is, guys, the city of Kabul.
Minimums.
And that's it, guys. Welcome to Kabul, everyone. So, yeah, we finally made it safely behind insurgency. So, we finally made it to Kabul for our last stop. Guys, thank you all so much for joining me on my first leg of the series. I hope you're all doing well. So, we'll be back here on Sunday for our first National Park stream. We'll cover the prologue from Boise to Boot. So we're going to go ahead and say hello to our next raid. I think we're going to raid 757 Spy. I believe that's who we're going to raid. So make sure you stick around for the stream, and I hope you guys are all doing well. Take care, everyone, and have a great start to your weekend. Goodbye, everyone.